Okay, cool. So, welcome everybody, and Scott, welcome. Maybe
Thanks.
Scott, if you're happy to, maybe just switch on to your webcam so that they can put a face to this voice, anonymous voice that's coming through. If you.
Okay, no problem. I think it's coming up now.
Yeah, it's gone blank. So, well, that's your picture. It's just your profile picture at this stage.
Okay, just give me a sec. Oh, for some reason it doesn't seem to want to work, but
Okay. No problem.
But that's my picture. That's what I look like.
Okay, but maybe just introduce yourself, explain what you do, why you know how to draw, and maybe just some of the stuff that you're using to draw and show us today.
Cool. So, good morning, everybody. My name's Scott Harris. I'm basically a sort of generalist digital artist. I mainly do conceptual art and illustration, and I'm pretty much completely self-taught, but I've been doing this for about 9 or 10 years, mainly focusing on characters myself, human anatomy, and that sort of thing, but covering things like environment design and vehicle design and things like that for entertainment purposes. So not as hardcore as industrial design, where you're actually designing real things. So for entertainment, we have a bit of flexibility. We can make things that don't really exist. Mainly art for films and games, video games, and also entertainment media like manga and comics, but still requires a lot of fundamental knowledge and things I've studied very long time on, basically, human anatomy, fundamentals of that, tons of industrial design concepts, a lot of the stuff that you guys know with solid forms and things like that, and then also sort of how light and color works for paintings and for representing sort of reality or some kind of super deformed reality with art. So yeah.
Super. And then maybe just give us like the overview of what you're going to do now for this lesson.
Okay, so for this lesson, I've actually taken some content from Digital Art School as curriculum. So Digital Art School is actually a school that I run for training digital art, and we're actually going to look at just some quick overviews of how to quickly construct a figure, looking at the proportions of the human body, the proportions of the head, and then also of the hand, so that you can use these drawings in conjunction with your industrial design to perhaps show off some products you're designing, perhaps someone using a toaster or a woman wearing sunglasses or something like that, where you need a human element to your work.
Super. And then what we'll do is, if any of you guys want to ask questions, I think if you just speak loud and sort of project your voice, it'll pick it up, and Scott should be able to hear you. And if at any point, if Scott's going too fast, I think just say, sorry, can you say that again? Or if you don't hear, because, yeah. Super. So, take us away, Scott.
Okay, cool. I'm going to try and be as clear as I can be, and I think you guys are going to need to take some notes just on the measurements, the proportional measurements. But don't see this as super technical in terms of the accuracy required in industrial design. Just kind of see it as a loose way to get a figure down. So the first thing we're going to look at is gesture, and it's sort of an ambiguous term, but I'm going to draw something that looks pretty horrible. But gesture is trying to capture a human form very quickly, like in 10 to 15 seconds, where the form looks like it's actually, doing something. And this isn't how we draw. It's just a way to try and get the spirit of a figure. And as an example, I'm going to use this drawing as an example, but you've got to try and think of these things as having a spirit, then having a form, and then having anatomy. So just as a quick overview of gesture, if we took this, just want to duplicate it, and I wanted to now render this crazy, ugly looking thing in form, I'd add some 3D to it. So the principle that I kind of want to show you guys here is that you first have to grasp the entire emotional movement. So if you want someone picking up a toaster or an object or something, you want to capture that movement first before you start moving into 3D. And the second phase of gesture would then be blocking these things out in 3D forms, things we know, cubes, spheres, cylinders, and so on. And you want to be proportionately correct in this, which I'll get to proportions next. But you want to have this idea of this form. Also, I just want to say this isn't a workflow that I'm doing now. I'm not saying you have to draw a scribble first. It's just to give you an idea of the thought process that goes into generating a character, or a figure, if you will. So here, I'm just basically adding some really rough scribbles of 3D forms on, using spheres and cylinders and things like that, just to get my figure pretty much grounded in reality, in terms of, you know, it's a 3D object, it's a 3D person. Okay, and hands, I mean, this is just indicative for now, because we'll also be covering hands as well. And then once you've kind of got this little 3D form stickman, I'm just going to make this stuff smaller. You can then move on to the anatomy stage. Now, this is super quick, super rough, and nasty looking, but I will get to pretty stuff just now. And you might notice what I do is I tend to have very light lines. You guys probably do this too. You draw lightly, or if you're on paper, if you're digital, you just make your layer lighter. That's actually part of workflow, which I'll show you, to getting stuff done really, really quickly. So now we have the spirit, if you will, here. It's not really called the spirit, but anyway, we'll just call it the gesture, the main essence. Let's call it spirit or essence. In the animation industry, they use the word essence a lot, because it kind of communicates the overall pose of the character. And then this would be the form, and then this would be the anatomy that I'm about to draw. And the anatomy, I have to just say up front, drawing people is actually extremely difficult, and it's going to take a very long time to get good at it. And it's probably not something you probably want to do as an industrial designer, but it could be very useful. There are a lot of shortcuts though, but I'll cover those later. So in the anatomy phase, you kind of get to, how does, you know, a human really look? I want to draw in, you know, the little details, the muscles and the ears, and get the eyes in there, even in a simplistic kind of form. Paying attention to muscle locations and things, so that it looks realistic. This is of course a simplification, but you can see that anatomy is really the last step, and the reason is because you want to make sure that your spirit and your essence and your form read correctly. They seem 3D. I know this is a little bit rough looking and ugly, but it's just to get the idea in there. So that's just a general overview of kind of how to think about these drawing people. To try and think of them as first a gestural sketch here, and then to think of the 3D form, and then to think of the anatomy and details. I think a lot of people start with anatomy, probably why the people look a bit crazy or a bit weird looking, because anatomy is super complex, and you're not going to be able to just go straight to this stage here without having a good essence or spirit to it, and then definitely good 3D form. Okay, so that's just an overview of getting gesture down in a general way. So let's look at some ways to draw figures, and I'll cover proportion while I'm doing that, like some basic constructions. So in the entertainment industry, but in a lot of industries that deal with drawing characters, we use 8 heads proportions rule. So perhaps you guys like measurements, I'm not sure, but this is very measurement orientated. So the 8 heads rule I'll show you here is using the head as our primary measuring instrument. And this is the full head, not just the sphere part of the head. So imagining that this is a full head. And you basically think of the body in 8 heads. So those are the first 4. These are the second 4. And you have checkpoints, right? And I do apologize if I'm going a bit quickly. There's quite a bit to this. So the first thing is that when you're drawing, you first draw the head, okay, and then you want to get in the position of the next item. So this bottom of the second head is actually the nipple line, if you will. And the bottom of the third head, so let me just number these for ease. Is basically the belly button, right? And the bottom of the fourth head is the crotch, which you can indicate with a V. The torso, if you just start out with a square, argument's sake, is about 3 heads wide. So you might want to note that, because another key thing with characters, whether you're drawing like some crazy Disney-styled, fat plumber guy, or you're drawing an ultra-realistic, human being, keeping things in proportion is extremely crucial to making it look believable. Not realistic, but believable. That's why, Pixar movie characters and things like that, they tend to look believable even though they don't look real. It's because their proportions are correct. Anyway, so we've got 3 heads across for the torso. And I tend to illustrate this like with a trapezoid kind of shape up to the belly button in a way. And you can kind of draw another V in here, upside down V, to indicate the rib cage. Then at the crotch area, this is actually the pelvis, which if you're looking at this from a side view, you'd the simplified form of it is sort of 2 ellipses, because the real world pelvis, it looks something like this. It's got a bowl shape to it. So it kind of goes like that, and then the tailbone comes in here. It's a bunch of holes and things. That's a front view. Anyway, so the bottom marker for 4 is crotch. So the easiest thing to remember is that the legs take up exactly half the entire height of the form. This is basically legs, and you could just say this is body. Okay. So that's 4 heads, and the legs are 4 heads. So you can just draw in a triangle, if you will, for the pelvis, and just connect it to the torso. I'll talk about male and female differences now, because they're actually significant differences. And then the legs, you can kind of just block in at the second head here. Sorry, the 6th. The bottom of the 6th. This is actually the point of the knees. The last head, the 8th head, is actually the point of the feet. So just in a simplified form, I'll just draw these trapezoid kind of shapes. And then you can just bring the legs down, just using lines for now if you want. And I'll clarify this. I'll draw on top of this just now with some form, just to give it a nicer, easier to read look. And then the arms, you might notice if you stand up, and I mean you're the best measurement as well for yourself. The arms extend down. The elbows are actually at the similar point to where the belly button is over here, just at the bottom of the 3rd head. So the elbows sort of come down like that, and then the forearm comes down to about just below the pelvis, where you can attach the hands. Simplified form here. So let me just clarify this. I'm going to draw with red. So the first part is the character's main head. And we know we measure that same size, that same general size, down 8. And these are what are called idealistic proportions. It's not that you have to draw every character like this. This is considered a general ideal rule, or our measuring stick for human proportions. Then the second head actually comprises of some of the neck going down to the nipples. So I'll draw these in here. The arms, of course, extend down first to the 3rd head over here by the belly button. And then down to the, you could say that the upper hip, if you will. And then the crotch is at the bottom of the 4th head marker. I'm actually going to just draw the heads in there so we can see them a lot easier. They're in green. And then, of course, the legs. The thigh is actually somewhat longer than the bottom of the leg. The main reason for that is the muscles are quite thick in that area. But in anime, manga, and comics, and a lot of stylized artwork, they tend to lengthen the length of the legs. So we have a distorted perception of the length to a degree. And also, when girls are wearing high heels, their legs also tend to look longer. That's obviously because the gastrocnemius muscle is busy stretching out there. So this is a basic overview of the head proportions and the 8-head system. I think the guy that pioneered this, his name is Andrew Loomis, and you can actually check out his books. A lot of them are free online. He was an American illustrator, I think in the 30s and the 40s, but he basically pioneered the fundamentals of comic illustration to a degree, because pretty much everybody uses his rules of proportion for measuring out character heads and stuff, and character heights and body proportions. And if you ever change the proportions, if you go 7 heads or 6 heads, everything else scales proportionately with this system. So I hope that this has been clear, at least on the human proportion side of things, and the width at least of the torso. I definitely would recommend doing additional studies into proportions, because you probably won't get this the first time, but just keep these rules in, and if you learn this off by heart, you're onto a good start. Okay. I'm going to do face proportions, or head proportions if you will, but it's technically face proportions. And I'll save this file so that Carl can give it to you guys later if you need it. I'll save it as a PSD or something.
Yeah, Carl, is this whole podcast, are we going to be able to go over it again to just recap on everything you said?
Scott, I don't know if you heard that question. He was just asking if it's all recorded, and I said, yeah, it is going to be recorded, and I'll share it with you guys over my Twitter, and then you have access to this video, and you can watch it again.
Yeah. It is a very, very fast, brief overview, but I do hope it's going to be helpful to you guys. Okay, let's look at the head. General head construction, and we're going to go into 3D now. I want to get the proportions out of the way so we get the measurements. The general head construction is actually pretty easy. You start with a circle. It's just to understand your measurement. And about a third of the way down, you could draw a line for the eye, and the eye line, if you will, and then you can halve that circle or sphere, actually, as well. Now, the bottom of this circle over here, so let's just call this eye line as a third of the way, right? A third of the way down. The bottom of the circle is actually the nose line. And again, this is idealistic proportions. So they were based on, I think, athletic proportions of an athletic kind of person, 8 heads. And this is the nose area at the bottom of the circle here. Sort of halfway through the circle is the eyebrow line. Just drawing it simplified here. And then the top of the head is, of course, or the top of the cranium, if you will, is the top of the circle. The cheeks tend to start sort of by the eye line and come down. And what you want to do is view the nose as a third, as a half of a halfway point between the middle of the eye line and the jaw. So, roughly halfway here, we have the jawline. And then halfway between the nose and the jaw, we have the mouth line. Okay, I'm going to go over this again, just in a different color so that these things are more clear. Oh yes, and of course the ears are between the eyebrows and the nose. So you'd kind of indicate the ears like this. Okay, let me go over this. These, honestly, if you learn these proportions, I mean, I know these drawings look totally trash and everything, but if you learn these proportions, you're really, really solidifying the fundamentals for yourself when it comes to rendering them in 3D, beautiful, you know, nice anatomied figures. Okay, so we have the sphere as our starting point, and 1/3 of the sphere down is the eye line. The bottom of the sphere here is the nose line. Then halfway through the sphere is the eyebrow line. Apologize for my bad handwriting. I was never good at writing. And then, if you duplicate the space between the nose and the eye line down here, you get the bottom of the jaw. You can see how the face tapers as well in this section. It tends to taper down. Now, again, it's idealistic. A lot of people have very square jaws. Some people have very round jaws. I just tend to do this trapezoid kind of shape as a general guideline, also basing it on where the cheekbones fall in the skeleton. I'll just vaguely show where that is. So we have the mouth line halfway between this point, the jaw, and the eye line. And then the ears fall between the nose and the eyebrows. Okay, so that's basically a head proportion map, the typical head proportion map. And if you want to draw the neck in, of course, that can come generally by the ear, where the ear and the jawline meet over here. So depending on whether it's a guy or a girl or a very young person or an older person, the neck can look different. Basically comes down like this and then moves into the what's called the trapezius muscle, or traps. You probably know what traps are. And that's basic head proportions. Okay. So I hope you guys got that. I'm going to move on to hand proportions quickly, and then we'll move into some good drawing techniques and good drawing workflows, and cool looking drawings, not rubbish looking drawings. Okay. So hands, you're going to battle with hands forever if you really want to get into it, because they're pretty complicated. But again, they have very simple proportions and easy to understand. You can draw a square or a circle if you want, like a sort of an ellipse shape. So I'll do both, actually. In essence, once you have the basic size of the hand that you want to get down, and just as a side note, you might want to write this down, you can measure the hand size basically by the size of the figure's face. So if you take your own hand and you put it to your face, you'll see your hand's pretty much the size of your face. So that's a good way to get your hand size, just a general face size, the front of the face. Anyway, once you have your basic guideline, you know, you've got a square or something you want to draw your hand in, halfway through marks the point between the palm and the fingers. So we'll draw the fingers at the top and the palm at the bottom. And the palm you can just indicate with a circle. And the fingers you kind of want to arch. In the round version, I'm going to just arch them like this. The square version, I'm going to kind of trapezoid them. And the thumb basically falls halfway through the palm. Okay, I'll draw this one's thumb here. And if you look at your own thumb, it's kind of halfway into the palm, halfway out. So I indicate this with a circle, halfway in and halfway out. And another interesting thing is if you look at if you measure the joints, you align the joints of your thumb to the joints of your forefinger or your pointing finger, you'll see that the thumb's actually pretty long. It's about as long as the pointing finger in terms of its functionality. So that's a good way to make sure your hand looks right, making sure the thumb's long enough, because people tend to draw them very short. Okay, and let's move on to the fingers. The tip of this point, the very edge of your overall square or your arch that you've drawn, is actually the middle finger, and it's the tallest finger. Some of the stuff's going to sound obvious, so I do apologize for the obvious sound of it. And if you had to imagine a fingernail on this point, the next fingers are that same size down. So I'm drawing these circles to show the top of the next two fingers. I'm just drawing them as squares here, just to get it right in a measurement sense. And I'll do a draw over as well, just to clarify this roughness. And then, using that same measurement, the pinky finger is about 1.5 nails down. Now this looks a little crazy, but I'll draw over it. And then the thumb extends, if in an archway, this is the index finger here, the thumb extends to the base, so you want to kind of get a nice angled arch going on there from about here out this way. Okay, I know this looks a little insane. Let's do a draw over and make these look like real hands. Okay, so let me first do the measurement, then I'll do a draw over. So basically, you have a shape, whether it's an ellipse or whether it's a square. Half of that shape divides the fingers and the palm, right? Half of the palm shape shows the start of the thumb, right? And it applies to both of these illustrations. The highest point of this shape over here defines the height of the middle finger. And if you imagine a fingernail size on that finger, one fingernail size away down defines the height of the forefinger and the ring finger. Then 1.5 fingernail widths down is the height of the pinky finger, or little finger. This is slightly off. I do apologize because my circle down here is a little wide for a real hand, but I'll reel it back into reality. And let me do a draw over of this quickly. Okay, so once you've really learned proportions and you know how long things should be and you know where there are key markers for things. I haven't covered knuckles here, but we're just going to keep things a bit simple for now. You know exactly how things should look. I know I've drawn the fingers together here. You can draw them apart, doesn't matter, but I'll just sketch in a hand quickly on top of this. You can see I kind of went a little awry in some of the measuring out here, but as a proportional measure, it makes a lot of sense. And this side here of the palm is actually pretty flat. It only curves out a little bit. Yeah, that looks pretty okay. Same thing here. So those are general hand proportions. I'll do some decent hand sketches just now. But just remember the measurement sizes. I think if I have to kind of make a simplified form of it, it's, I mean, just for a formula, just kind of half, you know, middle finger here at the highest point. Not necessarily in the center, but I mean, it could be. And then, of course, the joints, just as a quick reference, there are 2 joints on every finger, and they kind of just move in an arc like this. They're completely aligned. If you look at your own hand, and actually that's pretty much the best reference you're going to get, is looking at your own hand. You can see everything fits. Even the knuckles are aligned in an arc. Okay, so those are basically the proportions of head, hands, and body. And I just want to talk about some differences with the male and female figure quickly. Just some things to keep in mind. You can write them as notes. Men, their torso is generally wider than their hips, and they sort of have this kind of shape to them. And the reason being is because our pelvises are smaller. Women have a larger pelvis because they have to accommodate childbirth, whereas a woman's shape might be something like this, where her hips are actually as wide as her shoulders. You're with your girlfriend or something next time, just check it out. It's pretty true. So, yeah. But and I mean, when you're actually constructing, when you're trying to draw a really nice looking girl, big hips are appealing, even on skinny characters. And if your class is mainly guys, I don't know, but you'll notice that you kind of, your rib cage and your hips are just one straight line. They just go straight down like this. Okay, let's move on to, and so that's just important to remember when you're drawing, when you say to yourself, well, am I drawing a guy or a girl? Just make sure the hips are as broad as the shoulders on a female character, amongst many other things, but yeah. Okay, so let's say you actually want to draw a character that doesn't look like a random scribble or some kind of proportional diagram. There's a workflow to this, and the general workflow is 2 stages, an ultra rough stage and a very nice refined stage, if you will. Sorry, just give me a sec, I'm just saving. Okay. I did a demo with Carl a few weeks ago, or last week, I'm not sure, where we, you know, I just did a basic head with the idea was to put some really well-designed sunglasses on. And also, I think that's something to keep in mind. You guys are industrial designers, really. And your goal isn't to draw good people, obviously. Your goal is to really draw kick-ass looking industrial designs, product designs, and whatever the heck you're doing, right? So always see this as secondary, but it's going to help you sell your idea to whoever you're pitching to, because they want to see how this thing works. And being able to draw people is generally impressive, just to, you know, the average person. Okay, so let's just do a general workflow of a body, for realsies, if you will. Okay, so a common construction is to start with a sphere for the head, and now we're going to go straight into 3D, and I want to indicate that this is a sphere, and this is the full head size. Then, to kind of imagine in your mind what the line of action is, and the line of action is basically the general pose of this character. I'm going to make a guy standing up straight. I don't want to say too heroic, but his chest is out. He's a confident person. And there's actually a whole lot of theory based on people who lead with their chest, people who lead with their head, people who lead with their knees, defining the kind of people they are. You can imagine if I made this guy lead with his knees, he might seem like kind of a weak person. He'd have this kind of line of action. He kind of looks lazy. Okay, and then, and the line of action is kind of like the spirit as well. Then I want to just broadly define a chest, keeping things loose, keeping things rough. I use a sphere to define the stomach area, and a sort of conical kind of shape for the legs, for the pelvis. The arms and the legs, I use a system that's based on pretty much a theory of what's called opposing curves. In the human body, if we had to draw a side view of a human, I don't want to get too technical here, but we're made up of rhythmic curves. So if the head is curving this way, you know that the neck will curve this way, right? And if the neck's curving that way, you know that the chest will curve this way, right? So here's that curve. And the same thing, that means that just by the small of the back, the stomach curves this way, and then of course the butt curves that way. So you have this constant counter curves flow going on, like this. And that's important to remember because this opposing curves theory actually works throughout every single part of the body pretty much. And it's what adds dynamism to a figure drawing, that the figure drawing doesn't look like a stiff stick man. Okay. Anyway, back to our sketch here of the guy. So I use this theory, some people call it a lightning bolt theory, because you're going to be drawing a shape that kind of looks like this. Right. This is for the arms and the legs. Remembering my proportions now, I want this guy to have nice proportions. So I know his legs need to be somewhere here. I'll bring out his one leg here and his other leg here. Notice how I'm using that sort of lightning bolt shape. And in effect, it's defining the top of the leg like this, curving this way. And then, oh, wow, I drew that one wrong, sorry. It's like this. So you have a curve and an opposing curve. Curve and an opposing curve. So I'll draw it on this figure here. Here's my shapes. And I'm putting in sort of conical cylinders, if you will, following these curve lines. The back of the leg curves there and is sort of more straight in the front. Keep things really loose because you always have to tell yourself you're working in two phases here. I use opposing curves like this for the arms. Depends on the position of the arm actually which way these oppose, but we'll go into that now. This is just a dude, kind of, maybe he's, I'll change the direction of his face. Maybe he's looking to the right. And then for the arms, you can use this simple guideline tool once you've got the proportions generally down. Two parallel lines for the top of the arm, because we're not doing in-depth anatomy, and this kind of shape for the front of the arm, for the forearm, before you get to the hand. So here I've got my curves. I'm going to curve those parallels, and then use that shape to get to the arm like this. Let's say we were demoing, I don't know, some cool headphones, right? So I'm going to just pop some headphones on this guy. And we want to, we want to show the product being used in a cool way. This guy's enjoying his music, etc., etc. It can be intimidating because you think to yourself, well, heck, I don't know how to draw clothes. I don't know how to draw human anatomy. I think the idea is to keep the figure as simple as you can. And if you want to draw clothes, just use reference. Get photos for drawing those kinds of things. I mean, shoes, clothes, all of these things are pretty complicated to draw. It's hard to draw them confidently if you haven't been drawing for a while. Okay, so now I have this basic figure going. And this is the kind of workflow you need to always think about so that you are drawing without fear. Because I know, when we're drawing, even though I'm not necessarily an industrial designer, I think all people who draw, or people who enjoy drawing, we have the same fears. the fear of the blank page, the fear of lack of ideas, and so on and so forth. And the idea is you want to remove as much fear as possible so you can actually get to work. So let's work on this dude, right? As I said, we stick to roughs. We keep things light and loose. Loose is especially important because you don't want something looking stiff. I'll generally take this guy down, take his opacity down. If I was working on paper, I'd erase him just to sort of get him to a nice, very ghosty level. And now I want to define my guy. I'm going to zoom in here, so I do apologize if you're not seeing the full picture. And it's about remembering your proportions. You know, if the face is going to look crazy, if I have to put some crazy proportions on him. But now I want to go in and just be free with how I want to draw all the elements of the guy. Now I keep my proportions here. There's my eye line, there's my nose line, that's my sphere. Drawing light is also recommended, especially if you're prone to pressing very hard and messing up. There's my eyebrow line. Drawing his eyeballs in. Drawing his eyelids. Also, how big or small you draw the eyes is going to make the character look more or less real to a degree, or more or less cartoony, because you know, manga and anime and stuff have very large eyes. Disney characters also have super large eyes. Things like hair, you know, just do a brief indication. You guys don't really need to super define every element. Your goal is, let's say, these headphones. And don't judge me, I'm not an ID designer. Okay, same thing here with the proportions, 1 head, 2 heads. So I know that on this form that I built here, this is the nipple line roughly. So I can say, well, this is where the chest is. If that's the sort of bottom of the sternum, then I know my rib cage is coming down like this. And you can see a lot of anatomy knowledge kind of going on here. And also, as I said, the counter curves. I know that this head is curving back like that, so the neck will do that. So the neck will do that, and I will draw it that way. Another marker for finding the shoulders properly is, if you imagine where the ear is, where the jaw and the ear connect, you can draw sort of a triangle down. This shows the there's a name for this, but anyway, I completely forgot it now. But it shows the clavicle, right? The clavicle is where the collarbone joins, and the collarbones basically lead to the acromion, which is that little bone that you can feel on your shoulder at the very edge. So when you find that, it's kind of easy to get to the shoulder. Let's assume this dude's wearing a hoodie because he's cool and everything. At this point, I mean, you could probably wing most of the stuff. I mean, once you've got this down, you're pretty much set. Just wing in all the details before you go to the final refining stage. And I'll show you 2 ways to refine. One is like hyper-realistic, and the other one is more industrially design orientated, just simplified for the purposes of really just showing off the product. Okay, I'm just going to sketch a bit here. I have to say, like, just be free at this stage. I mean, especially if you're working digitally, you know, who cares? You've got your underdrawing. Just do whatever you need to do and draw quickly. If you draw slowly, you tend to have these very cramped lines. Things look stiff, and I mean it applies to ID as well. You've probably heard this before. You just don't want things looking stiff and, I don't know, too boring. It must look tight and clean and energetic. It must look like it's a real thing. And everything in life has gesture, not just living things. I mean, mountains have gesture, toasters have gesture. Just to help you as well with figure drawing, I learned this from a guy called Saikra Yesin. He's online. Definitely check him out if you're interested in this sort of thing. It's called the coil technique. If you don't know how to draw something foreshortening, although you probably do, but I mean, with figure drawing you want to be quick. He just takes a coil, and that sort of helps him define the cylinder direction. So if he was making something come to the front of the camera, you know, like some kind of worm or something, he just coils it out. So that's what I sometimes do for the feet. I have this basic 3D shape for the feet that I use, just kind of like a triangle with a bit of a heel. And then I generally coil it out to the front because shoes tend to go over that shape. Anyway. Okay, so we have our rough guy going on here. And here's the moment of truth and what I call the fun part. You have pretty much a good idea of what he is. In this instance, we've got a dude wearing headphones, he's got a hoodie on, he's got jeans on, etc., etc. You want to let the creative juices flow, I guess. And you want to make this model workable in your ID portfolio or whatever. You want it to look pro. So I'm going to do a simple simplification for rendering first. Okay, I just use like an inking pen. It's like a gel ink pen that I've got in this application. It sort of mimics real-world tools to a degree. And now you want to just make sure everything kind of mainly looks okay. Right. So for ID, this is what I'd recommend, keeping things simple. Your industrial design object, like the headphones, for example, of course you want to ultra define those. Define them as you've been taught. For the character, though, you want to just keep things simplistic, almost like fashion illustration. Because you don't want to draw too much attention to the character. You're really about the product. You can see I'm not really, you know, putting in his eyelashes and every little detail of his face and shading things. I just want to keep things loose. I'm about the headphones, and I'll do them last actually, just because they're what count. Just giving the you know, your client an idea, or whoever it may be, your boss, whatever the case may be. So I just use long strokes, quick strokes. I just flip the image to make sure things look reasonably okay. And you just want it to read as, you know, young person with headphones on. I think even in the ID world, really what's going to sell ideas and get people excited is appeal. It's the idea of appeal. So I come from very like entertainment understanding of that, not really product, but appeal is pretty much crucial to getting people interested in something. If it appeals to them, if it looks appealing, if it looks really awesome, fun, you know, it makes them feel something, you know, a good emotion or a bad emotion, whatever the case may be. And figures in your industrial design work, really can give it more appeal. People will go, oh, okay, I see how this works. Oh wow, I love the way that character's wearing that product or using that toaster or whatever the case may be. I feel like even in a headphone piece, you might not even have to fully draw a full character. You really want to keep the focus up here. Young person, headphones, you know, just in this practical example. Don't want to go too detailed. It's looking pretty reasonable right now. Okay, let's keep it up here at a bust shot, sort of from the waist up. Okay, and then, you know, I'm no ID designer, but your headphones would then be probably full color, really well defined, really well detailed and drawn. Of course, proper perspective. And that's another thing. Perhaps you have questions about, like, you know, wow, this guy's drawing figures without perspective. I think, you know, you use perspective to a degree in figure drawing. But the truth is, you know, when you're looking at a figure, we're generally looking at about 27mm lens or something like that, or about 50mm lens if I'm not wrong, 50 or 60 degree, something like that, something with not a lot of distortion, not a lot of foreshortening. So you don't have to think too hard on perspective unless you're doing crazy comic work where the hero's foot is flying to the camera or something. But you do want to keep things 3D all the time. Okay, these aren't very well designed headphones, but I'm sure you get the idea. And, you know, you could probably do extraction drawings, you know, where you have like a square. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what you've learned in your curriculum, but of course, laying out and displaying your ideas well is probably crucial to selling them. You could detail, you know, the part of the headphone that has, I don't know, sockets in it and lights and LEDs and so on, off this character. You can see the usefulness of the figure drawing in this way. You could detail the band. It's got, you know, foam padding or something in it. This is just a brief example, obviously. So let's talk about the workflow again, because I just want you to keep in mind how important it is. Because if you end up creating 5,000 layers or drawing the rough sketch 60 times, you're going to eventually have a drawing that looks really rubbish when you get to the final lines. You want to work in 2 phases. Okay, phase 1, sorry for my handwriting, is rough, right? Rough, but clear. Okay. There's a saying in the animation industry called draw clear, not clean. Now this comes from the Disney masters, and I mean, a lot of these guys pioneered some great fundamental drawing techniques that apply to all forms of art. So draw clear, not clean. That means make sure the idea is readable, make sure that gesture is there, that the pose makes sense. So here I just say draw rough but clear, and what I mean by that is in your rough, don't be ambiguous. Don't draw it so rough that you're not even sure if the guy's wearing a t-shirt or a hoodie or something. You need to have all the ideas of the figure set in. And once you have that, phase 2 comes. And this is just extracting the good lines. That's one way to put it. Or refining your existing lines. You want to get to this stage of clarity. Now, I'm not saying this guy's the greatest drawing ever. I mean, there's a lot more to talk about in terms of figure drawing, but you want it to clearly read, okay, dude with headphones, hoodie, he's clearly young, he looks like a youthful dude, etc. Okay, so lastly, I mean, and then I'm totally open to questions, or if you guys want to see something else, I just want to show you guys quickly different ways to construct the figure really quickly. And I'll give you some tips if you're really interested in this kind of art or entertainment art or anything. So there's a million zillion ways to construct a figure, but all the proportions are generally based on the same measurements that we've done. Head, hands, and body, same thing. Most artists, especially entertainment artists, we always keep in mind, you know, that women look different to men. Men have more edges to their body, women have more curves. But point being is there's a lot of ways to get to that final stage. So if you remember, we spoke about the spirit stage, which I'm going to draw as these curly S things. Try and zoom in a bit here. Or essence, right? And basically this is the gesture. You have the gestural stage. This is a way of thinking about it. This isn't the actual way you work. Then you have the form stage, right? Your spheres, your cubes, built on top of that gesture. Oh my word, that's a terrible cylinder. And then, so let's call this form, and last but not least, I'm just reiterating here, then you have your anatomy phase, right? So that would be like dude's head, and you know, his actual musculature, his chest. So that's a way to think about it when you're drawing it. And when you're actually drawing it, let's just talk about some quick constructions. People may have said, oh, you just start with a stick man. I'm actually super opposed to that idea because it usually looks super rubbish. People will go, you know, hey, just, you know, draw the stick man, draw his hands, then his legs, or whatever. That's not a good way to do it. Think 3D all the time. You guys are industrial designers, so I'm pretty sure you're used to that. Always think sphere. Always think, you know, box or ball, if you will, for the chest. Of course, keeping things in proportion. Keep things 3D all the time. You may want to mannequin the entire drawing before, as in your understructure. So instead of doing a rough gestural sketch, you have your gesture in mind. Then you want to mannequin the whole thing. So what I mean by that is you want to 3D the whole thing. So you have spheres and trapezoids, 3D trapezoids. You have cylinders everywhere. And this is great. I mean, it gives you a solid foundation of the 3D of what you're trying to draw. Some people like to use the opposing curves method. So that's just focusing on the fact that the body's full of opposing curves. So still have 3D elements. The head is still a sphere, and you kind of have like this ball for the chest. But then you use opposing curves for the arms. And, you know, you barely have to define the hips, really. You use the same opposing curves for the legs, whether they're going the same direction or whatever the case may be. So you can see there's a bunch of ways to construct, and actually, when it comes to figure drawing, it's not very, I want to say accurate. It's not as accurate as industrial design, and what I mean by that is, you know, the human figure is constantly moving. I mean, we shift weight to one hip to another, and you know, next thing we know, everything looks different. You can't ever draw a human figure with this sort of engineered precision that you might draw a toaster or something. And so keep that in mind. Be more loose and free when you're drawing a figure. I mean, you probably could draw it to that degree if you spent like, I don't know, 5 years on it. But you want to just be loose. You want to communicate the pose. And gestural sketches, which kind of are those messy things that I showed you, I want to draw some guy singing to like a crowd. I just want to get the spirit of him down. I don't need to draw all this complicated anatomy. Just want to get the spirit of him down. If I want to draw someone running, you know, just I know that his line of action's like this. He's moving forward. You know, one leg's up, the other leg's back. It's just to, you want to feel out that gesture, because that's going to help you when you come to building the 3D form on top to go, hey, you know, this read very clearly. It had a good read in the scribbled sort of gestural stage. And what artists do, it's common practice, is, you know, we'll sit in a coffee shop for 2 hours and watch people walk by and try to capture their pose. Other people in the coffee shop, people walking past, in 10 seconds. It's literally horrible looking gesture sketches that you don't show anybody. But the point is, they teach you about human form. and your mind kind of records how this stuff looks. So you can see, you can get very quick results that clearly communicate what the figure is doing. So gesture, super important. Remember the three phases, sort of essence, form, or gesture, form, and anatomy. Yeah, so I guess that's all I have to teach you for now. I'll just reiterate, drawing figures well is very, very difficult, and it takes a long time. There's a lot of things to consider. But anyway, yeah, I'm open for questions.
Scott, before we do questions, do you want to maybe just show some drawings you've done, if you have them?
Yeah, okay, sure. I really love Disney-style cartoon stuff, and to draw that stuff you need to have actually very good realistic knowledge. So let me just get some sketches open. It may or may not be your thing, so I apologize if it's not. Okay, so for my school, I have to be quite a generalist, so I just pretty much do every style, from heavy perspective stuff to, anime things. Can you guys see this? I'm not sure if it's showing.
No, it's still just showing your
Oh, okay, sorry, I'll switch it now. Whoopsie. Okay, here we go. Okay, cool. Can you see that?
No, we just see you. It came for a second.
Do you see it now? Or not?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, cool. So I do everything from like children's illustration to comic books, manga, whatever the case may be, or whatever the client needs. But all of this stuff is pretty much based on real human anatomy, real skeletal structure, real musculature, and of course, real skin and things like that. The proportions change though. So you'll see I have all kinds of styles. This particular piece was for Body Glove USA. It was for a skateboard design. So they wanted some pop-looking girl thing. These are more like Disney orientated. This is more realistic. Tending toward a comic book style, more realistic. Again, this kind of piece, very Disney, but very expressive emotionally, versus just this figure doing something. More Disney-oriented stuff. That's fan art, Cortana from Halo. This is for a print set series that a friend and I were selling online. And again, I mean, you can see the proportions here. They may not be super accurate to the 8 heads, but they stay in proportion to one another. So I think she's about 6 heads or 6.5. All the anatomy applies, the way her hips curve and her body moves. You can tell she's a girl. She's not a guy. Same thing here, more comic art orientated. I'm mainly a character artist versus, say, environment designs and vehicle concepts, but I know all the theory for that stuff. Don't know if you guys have seen this movie. It's Frozen, so pretty cool movie. Again, this is sort of a comic book Disney style. So Harley Quinn from DC Comics. And these are just very refined sketches for prints and other projects that I've been working on. As well, like things like cloth, they actually have their own rules. So I wouldn't be discouraged if you find that you're not drawing cloth and things well. Cloth actually is a study on its own. It has 7 kinds of folds that you have to learn and how weight affects different materials, and it's pretty complicated but cool. So this is just some of my stuff, varies in style. So yeah, these are game concepts, snowboarding game. So yeah, that's some character stuff, and I can show you some paintings quickly.
Scott, what programs
Yeah.
do you use for your drawing?
I was pretty much solely Photoshop, but then I found this really cool Japanese application that they recently released in English called Clip Studio Paint, and I'd really recommend checking it out. It's pretty much all the features of Photoshop for $500, and it's really, really good. So it's called Clip Studio Paint, 3 separate words.
And that has the pressure sensitivity if you're drawing on a fancy screen, a Wacom tablet or screen, and all of
Yes.
that.
Yeah, it supports all those features, whether you're using Wacom, which is WinTab drivers, or if you're using something that using N-Trig pens, which you may or may not have heard of. Okay, so this is like
They want to be sure that you drew this.
yeah, I totally did. The thing is, I'm like a ball of contradictions because it's kind of weird to see, fine art paintings mixed with cartoony stuff, but I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. So yeah, these are done in Photoshop, both of these. Actually, all of them are done in Photoshop. Photoshop paints really well. It's got a nice feel to it. This is super rough. I mean, you can see, if you zoom in, you can actually just see the paint strokes. It's just the basic brush in Photoshop. But there's all sorts of rules about light and color in this kind of art that you really need to get a firm grasp of. I mean, these aren't actually, in my opinion, they're not actually very good at all. But I mean, in the industry, they'd probably diss me for this kind of work. But you do what you can, Yeah, this is a matte painting. It actually uses photo textures with painting to give the rocks a nice realistic kind of effect. Yeah, this is just from scratch. And I mean, specifically when you're working in the entertainment field, composition is pretty much fundamental to communicating the idea you want. I suppose in ID as well, when you're presenting, you need to compose your pages very well. But in art, I mean, the entire piece just needs good composition, because it's not going to sell the idea if it's badly composed. And then last, I'll just show you some color characters.
Scott, I mean, we have Sketchbook Pro, and that's kind of what we use a lot of. Have you worked with that?
Yeah, I have. Sketchbook Pro is totally awesome. I mean, totally perfect. I mean, also I love that they've built in pen support into how the tools work, so you can access things quickly, and Copic markers and stuff. I mean, a lot of people I know, other artists, use Sketchbook Pro. I actually have Sketchbook Pro. It's just that Clip Studio Paint is so awesome that now I don't want to use anything else but Clip Studio. So, but yeah, I mean, I've used pretty much every kind of drawing app, from Paint Tool Sci, from all the Autodesk stuff. You're always trying to find a faster way to work, because things can get super busy. Okay, last.
Okay.
Sorry.
You got
last.
No.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Just the last bunch of stuff. These are some character paintings. Again, varying in style. I do whatever I need to do that the client requires, or whatever's necessary for the project I'm working on. This is just fan art of Ariel if she were grown up. These sort of Disney-styled illustrations. I don't want to say Disney-style, but it's kind of that expressive, animated, conceptual art in a way. Again, it's that Cortana piece, this time in color. It's that Dawn piece. I didn't actually color this. A friend of mine did. And she's really also a really good artist. Her name is The-Ez. You can Google her.
Just say that again, Scott.
It's The-Ez. So THE-EZ. And just like quick coloring, quick shading, not too much light going on here. That's the Harlequin piece in color. And you can see what I tend toward. I'm very character orientated. I do environments and things, but that's not where my heart is. And so I'd say also, even in ID, design things you want to draw and that are fun, and work for companies you want to work for. I think if you're going to start designing things you hate, like, well, probably toasters, you're not gonna have a very good life. So, really pursue what your passion is, because you'll do it with a zealousness that will make you really excel at what you're doing. People can see when you enjoy something in your drawing versus something you weren't really that interested in. So yeah, that's just some of my stuff. Cool.
Super. Questions, guys? You're all happy? You have no general questions?
Can we do this more often?
They want to know if we can do this more often, but then we'll have to start paying you. Thanks, bro.
I wouldn't mind some payment.
Because, to be honest, you've given a lot of content and a lot of information in actually just an hour.
Yeah.
So I think everyone's got a lot in their minds. And
Cool.
yeah, sorry, you have one question.
Do you have a quick way of rendering in color?
Okay, I do. I'll show you quickly. So let me open up some artwork that I'm busy with, and I'll put it on screen now.
Is your question related sort of when you do a sketch, you just want a touch of color? So like, yeah.
Okay, it should come on screen in a second. Okay, so there's this movie I like. It's called Chronicles of Riddick, and there's a scene where Riddick kicks some guy's butt by killing him with a teacup, and I thought it was pretty funny. But so, I mean, let's just say this is your sketch. The fastest way, okay, and you know, we can get a bit complicated here, but the fastest way is to just lay in what are called flats. That means the base mid-tone of the color. So that's what the color would look like if it's not lit or in shade. I don't know if you guys cover color much or not, but
Yeah.
so what I would do is, you know, whoa, just hold on a second. That's a bit yellow. I follow like a pretty simple rule, which is basically flats, highlights, and shadows. And if you stick to that, you can get more complex with the color choices later on. Just want the right tone here. Okay, let's just say this is the mid-tone, right? So I'm not going to pay attention to the lines for now. Let me do this dude's head. So I just lay out a flat, and you can follow this rule. It's pretty easy. It's 3 steps. Just do flats, which is a mid-tone, and you do highlights and shadows. So here's the flat, right? I want to grab the highlight, so I make sure I pick the flat tone, and then I ramp up the not the saturation. I ramp up the value range, so I make it brighter. And well, you can ramp up the saturation too, or the chroma. Don't know what terminology you guys are aware of. And then I just make sure I know where my light's coming from. So I'm going to say it's coming from here, right? And now I'll put in the light like this. I'm thinking about this guy in 3D right now. I mean, you can't place light without thinking about things in 3D. See, I feel like that's not even light enough. I want to go even lighter. Right, we're just going to do his head quick. So that's the highlights, or the highlights, and then the shadows. Then I'll grab the same color again, and so this is, I don't get too technical, but you kind of want to add a bit more blue or cooler color into when you're doing the shadows, like heading into purples, because a lot of the time, you know, when the sun is shining, you probably know this, you've got atmospheric perspective, things tend to be bluer. Well, actually, shadows also tend to be blue because shadows are filled not with the color of sunlight, which is more orange. They're filled with the sky color. Okay, I'm going to use this for shadows. Don't have to get too technical. And there's some rules called global lighting, which basically means that, you know, the darkest points of the face are by the nose holes, the corners of the mouths, and the corners of the eyes. And then once you've got these down, so you've got your midtones, you've got your shadows, you've got your highlights, let me just kill all this messy stuff. Then you can just blend it if you want it to be smooth. Right, and I mean in this application blending's super easy. I just go and hold Alt and my cursor turns to the color picker. I pick the color I want and then I blend them together so that I get a smooth gradient. So you can't really see these lines of shadow anymore. They kind of blur into one another. Hence I super recommend this application if you really want to check out this kind of thing. And I'd basically render the whole drawing like this, just piece by piece, doing his eyes, you know, doing his mouth, same thing, highlights, midtone, shadows. Always placing midtone first, which is the flats. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. It's not much more complicated than that.
Any other questions? Good. Was that helpful?
Yeah.
So yeah, Scott, I think thanks very much, and yeah, I think that was very interesting and helpful.
I want to ask you where you blend with Sketchbook.
We'll have to look. Do you know where this blend with Sketchbook, Scott, or is it?
So Sketchbook also uses Alt. So what I do is I'd Alt pick the color between two colors when they mix, if that makes sense. I'll just show you quickly. So let's say we've got red, and then you've got blue, right? You want to blend red into blue now. So I'd pick red and I'd spray lightly red. And you see it starts becoming purple. I'd pick that color. You know, hold Alt, pick that color, and then gently spray it to get the blend going. Until you've got this really nice, you know, if you keep working at it, it gets ultra smooth, and then you've got red, purple, blue.
And the brush you're using is quite like it's soft edged.
Yeah, you can just use an airbrush, you know, so it'll work fine.
So it uses color mixes and not Copic.
Yeah, because in Sketchbook, obviously with the Copic colors, you have the in-between colors that are defined by the Copic markers. Would you still rather use the Alt method, or is that just what you prefer?
No. I think, you see, Sketchbook's Copic system is actually designed to work like real Copic. So in that case, you need to, I mean, the truth is with Copics, a lot of the time they were designed for manga artists in Japan, and they work in a very specific order. You even have color bleeding with the Copics in Sketchbook. So I'd actually recommend researching in what order to use which color value ranges of Copics, because you know they're all split nicely into different value ranges, because that's a different system. This is just a general painting system of how like real paint works.
Does that answer?
Yeah, it's just the mixes.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Super. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Cool, no problem.
Cool. And we'll chat again.
Cool, okay. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna
Cool.
stop the podcast.
Cool. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.